Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to another player biography as we get a four-part series on a man who was a quiet superstar, yet made an enthralling impact wherever he was. A man who got quite a bit of attention, yes, but perhaps not as much as he deserved. I'm talking about Ronnie Franchise, yes. Long before he was the current GM of the Seattle Kraken, he was an important part of hockey for every team he played for, developing an uncanny level of consistency, yet still managed to fly under the radar in terms of his overall greatness. Yes, indeed, the man, Ron Francis. In in part one, we will cover his time with the Hartford Whalers, or at least the first few seasons there. A man who never dominated the game quite in the way of his peers, but excelled at it differently and effectively. Now, here we go. Ron Francis, Part 1, The Early Whalers Years. Ronald Michael Francis was born March 1st, 1963 in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada. From a young age, Francis displayed a natural ability to make plays happen on the ice, also being the ultimate team player and leader, bringing out the best in his young teammates. In both 1975 and 76, Francis played well in the renowned Quebec International Pee Wee Hockey Tournament, representing his hometown of the Sioux. As his game progressed, he excelled as a member of a midget team, the Sault Ste. Marie North Stars, at the age of 16, where he scored 57 goals, 92 assists for 149 points in 45 games. This, of course, caught the attention of his hometown's local junior club, the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, or simply the Sioux Greyhounds of the OHL, Ontario Hockey League. He joined the club for the 1980-81 season. As the year went on, scouts were taking notice of this young forward. They noticed that he had a great offensive presence, was a tremendous setup man, a playmaker, was great at shot redirection in front of the net, and was also great at winning faceoffs, played well in the forecheck, and wasn't afraid to play any kind of defensive game. As the season progressed, so did his rise up the ranks among Central Scouting, and it looked like he was going to be a high draft pick in 1981. The Greyhounds made it all the way to the J. Ross Robertson Cup, which is the OHL championship, but were swept by the Kitchener Rangers, thanks in large part to their star defenseman, a fellow by the name of Al MacInnis. An article published in the Hockey News just before the draft, which previewed the whole thing, complimented Francis' abilities to stay within the action, but felt that his skating and overall strength needed work. Francis wasn't a overly huge guy. He did finish the season with 26 goals and 43 assists for 69 points in 64 games. Oh, here we go. June 10th, 1981, the infamous Montreal Forum. A 10-hour drive from the heart of the Great Lakes of the Sioux to La Belle Province. Ron Francis, 18 years old, eagerly awaited his fate. With the way things were ranked, obviously future Hall of Famer and the star of the draft was Quebec Major Junior Hockey League Cornwall Royals star Dale Howardchuk. It was the man to go to number 1 to Winnipeg, and lo and behold, there it was. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Francis was ranked number 5, and then number 5 pick was the Washington Capitals heading into the draft, where many felt that's where Francis would end up. Whereas Hartford Whalers, who had the 4th pick, were looking at Bob Carpenter, the high school phenom out of Massachusetts. Picks 2 and 3, the LA Kings and Colorado Rockies were thought to be looking at defensemen. Well, what would take place would be quite a surprise. The Capitals traded with Colorado up from the 5th to the 3rd pick in the draft as just it was getting underway. And after the Kings also made a bold move, taking center Doug Smith rather than a defenseman, the Caps stunned the Whalers, taking the high school phenom Bob Carpenter, who had a cover story in Sports Illustrated. And he was expected to become the biggest star in American hockey history. Well, the world had taken notice of American hockey more so ever since the Miracle on Ice in 1980. But Carpenter out of Beverly, Massachusetts was going to be built as practically a local boy hero, since Beverly was only a couple of ways from Hartford, Connecticut. The shocked Carpenter actually was also accompanied by his angered father by all this whole scenario, and the Whalers were left scrambling with their jaws dropped and shocked looks on their face. So they decided to settle for Ron Francis at pick number 4. Who didn't know this is where he would be. Either way, he's 4th overall in a pretty solid draft class for the most part, with 2 future Hall of Famers in Grant Fuhr and Al MacInnis being drafted after him. Also, players such as Joe Cirella, Tony Tanny, James Patrick, Randy Mueller, and the before-mentioned Bob Carpenter went on to have productive NHL careers, though Carpenter wouldn't pan out like the star he was supposed to be, but still played on 1,178 NHL games in an 18-year career, and got his name in the Stanley Cup. So it's official. Ron Francis, he's a Hartford Whaler. Yes, the Hartford Whalers. Just look at this punch. You can literally make every 80s sitcom contemporary music cliche in just one pick alone. The Whalers' history hasn't been that long because, well, they've only been in the NHL for a couple seasons. They were, of course, known as the New England Whalers of the WHA, and they were a team that actually had great success. And, of course, they entered the NHL in 1979 after the WHA folded and moved to Hartford. They brought along 51-year-old Gordie Howe with them, as well as his sons Marty and future Hall of Famer Mark. Also, Dave Keon was along for the ride, a former Toronto Maple Leafs icon and future Hall of Famer. And their first year in the NHL, they actually slipped into the playoffs, where they had the 1-16th overall format back then. But after Gordie's retirement, things kind of went to hell in the 1980-81 season. They finished 21-41-18. Their power play was abysmal. Their penalty kill below average, but nothing completely terrible. Scoring quite a bit, but not enough. Allowing goals, second worst in the league. So yes, this team had problems. Well, the team was coached and managed by Larry Plow. I don't know. A star player for the team during their WHA days. But here's the thing. He was only 34 years old. I mean, that's young enough for a coach for one thing, but a coach and a general manager? That's pretty crazy. This isn't to say that this Whalers team didn't have talent, because they sure as hell did. Only thing is that they traded their top scorer, Mike Rogers, who had 105 points in the 80-81 season and a 10th round draft pick to the Rangers for unproven Doug Sullivan, defenseman Jerry McDonald, who would only play 8 games for Hartford, and gritty defenseman Chris Katsopoulos, with unconfirmed reports that he, has an aspiring musician for a brother named Jesse. But anyway, Whalers fans balked at this trade somewhat, and Plow considered this to, he was considered to be in over his head by many media pundits. The team had their leading goal scorer, however, Blaine Stoughton. They also had the immensely talented Mark Howe, who was transitioned from forward to defense, and that was definitely the right call. Also, Dave Keon was about to enter his 22nd pro hockey season and 17th in the NHL. Actually, sorry, 18th, I should say. He was still there. Other included pugnacious tough guy Gary Howard, fresh off 2 Stanley Cups with the New York Islanders, a highly talented checking forward in Rick Meagher. They made a big grab when they acquired Philadelphia Flyers star forward Rick McLeish, coming off his 7th 30-goal season. And they did have up-and-comers such as Ray Neufeld, character players such as Jordy Douglas and Warren Miller, and the defense really didn't look like they had much going for it other than Howe taking on the role. They had gritty, young Blake Wesley. It's obvious where the talent in that family went. And they're hedging bets on Mark Renaud, coming a big part of this team as well. And veteran tough guy Paul Schmier added a bit of substance. In goal, they had veteran John Garrett and former Pittsburgh starter youngster Greg Millen. Yeah, this team wasn't exactly the tools of a championship team, but Francis would be, entering hell here from some say. Actually, he might be better off there at this rate. Well, the team was a mixed bag with little direction. However, Francis wasn't expected to make the team. As a matter of fact, the plan was for Francis to attend camp but go back to the Sioux for one more year of junior hockey to continue to develop his game, and, he was doing a pretty damn good job. He had 48 points in 25 games, close to 2 points a game during his time with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds in the 81-82 season. However, in Hartford, there were problems. Well, problems in the sense that they absolutely sucked. As part of the new divisional realignment and new playoff format, the Whalers were now in the Adams Division, along with the Montreal Canadiens and Boston Bruins, 2 consistent powerhouses, the Buffalo Sabres, another perennially good team, and their WHA alums, the Quebec Nordiques, who are, again, rising through the ranks with some great young players of their own. In their first 16 games, the Whalers were 2-7-7, and they needed a big shot in the arm. So rather than wait till next season and panicked, Larry Plow made the call and gave Ron the call. He was going to Hartford, and at just 18 years old, was going to be a professional hockey player. So on November 14, 1981, Ron Francis would suit up for his first ever NHL game at the Hartford Civic Center, for a game that will have the Whalers hosting a team even worse than they are, the Washington Capitals, who had the guy Hartford wanted, Bob Carpenter. The Whalers fan base was loyal, but it wasn't overly large. The Civic Center held just over 14,500 people capacity-wise, and was very seldom ever full. For this game, a crowd of 11,278 would see, quote-unquote, the guy who was their first-round draft pick make his debut. Ron was entering the NHL world known for this guy named Gretzky, a fellow Greyhound alum, actually, in Edmonton, who is approaching a record 50 goals in 39 games in just his 3rd season. And the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion New York Islanders were dominating the league and indeed were the toast of said league. Well, he stepped on the ice in Faceoff in the circle with the man who had been taken, one pick before him, Bob Carpenter, and won his fair share of draws. Played a solid game hustling for the puck and actually getting 3 shots on goal on Dave Parle of the Capitals. However, Parle stopped all of Francis' shots and all the 44 he'd faced that day, as the Whalers would lose 4-0. Not a memorable debut for number 10. However, after a 4-day break, they host the struggling Toronto Maple Leafs, actually a very team I cover on this channel, as a matter of fact. The 18-year-old Francis is in the face-off circle with a man he looked up to a great deal, the great Daryl Sittler. Also, with the game tied at 1-1 in the first period, Francis took the puck and made a beautiful setup for Doug Sullivan, giving him his first career NHL point with an assist. That wouldn't be his last. Early in the second period, he then set up tough man Gary Howitt for a goal. Francis has 2 assists in the game in just his second NHL game, and the Whalers lead 4-1. Then on the power play, not long after, Mark Howe was in control of the extra man advantage and in control of the puck. He finds Sullivan, and Francis at center gets the puck, directing it beautifully into the net, past Vincent Tremblay, his first career NHL goal. A banner night in just his second game. The Whalers won 8-5, and Francis was named second star of the game. His NHL career was off to a good start. After playing a few games in quite stellar fashion, adding an assist and a goal during that time, he visited the Montreal Forum on November 29th for the first time since he'd been there on June 10th when he was drafted, putting on a Whalers jersey for the first time. Without fear, he takes on the likes of Larry Robinson and Rod Langway of the famous Montreal defense head-on. And in front of those loud Forum fans, Francis, despite his team coming up short, they put on a show, another 3-point night with a goal and 2 assists in the Whalers' 6-3 loss to the Habs. Francis is named third star of the game. They have Francis integrated very well with the top forwards, and he has another 2-point night the very next game in his first trip to Maple Leaf Gardens, an arena he watched from his living room in the Soo his whole life. He's named first star of the game. And then he had a huge game against the Blues. 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, and a 5-1 win at home. He really helped light up the superstar goaltender Mike Liut. In a 9-6, and then in a 9-6 loss to Boston on Boxing Day, he had 2 assists, and his success over Toronto continued with 3 assists, as he and Stoughton are making a good team as of late. They win that one. Francis had 26 points in his first 21 games, and the Whalers fans were starting to show love to their new star. He began the new year with a home-and-home series against the Penguins, where he had 5 points in those 2 games. A stat we don't see too often in these videos is Francis getting a 10-minute misconduct for getting involved in a bench-clearing brawl. Well, needless to say, and that was on January 11th against the division rivals Quebec. Mind you, it was only just for leaving the bench. He didn't really throw anything, other than his gloves maybe. He also scored 2 goals against the Blackhawks, always at the right spot at the right time. And he had 14 points in 11 games in January, but he would actually miss 5 games due to injury at the end of the month into February, but wouldn't miss a game the rest of the season when he returned. He had 9 points in 10 games upon his return in February, and in a game against the toast of the league, the 2-time defending champion New York Islanders, Francis assists the only goal of the game, which indeed was actually Stoughton's 40th of the year, a 9-1 loss to the champions. Yeah, the Whalers still sucked. In a visit to Edmonton, Francis took on Wayne Gretzky as the Whalers took on the dominant Edmonton Oilers and fell 7-4. Francis did win some draws against the Great One, but it really didn't matter at the end. Gretzky was on a path to a remarkable season that included, he had a hat trick and 2 assists in this game alone, 5 points, just under stop for his 92 goals, a record, 120 assists, a record he would later break, and 212 points, a record he would later break. Francis, however, continued to rule in March, and on the 10th, the Winnipeg Jets came to town, meaning that they brought rookie sensation and the first overall pick of that draft Ron was a part of, Dale Hawerchuk, with them. In this showdown, Ronnie got the better of Dale as the Whalers down the Jets 6-2 and had a 3-point night. With a goal and 2 assists, it was a +3, while Ducky had a goal and a helper, but was a -2. Francis had a couple more big outings towards the end of the season, 2 goals on March 27, as they actually went the distance with the Islanders, and actually had a 4-3 lead before falling apart and losing late 5-4, and then had 2 goals and a loss to the Habs on March the 30th. The Whalers finished 21, 41, and 18, a measly 60 points, literally the exact same record they had from the year prior, thus showing no growth. Francis had a marvelous rookie year, however, with 25 goals and 43 assists for 68 points in just 59 games. And his chemistry with Blaine Stoughton was off the charts. They collaborated on a total of 41 of 68 of Francis's points, all but 27. That is insane, including Stoughton assisting on 13 of his 25 goals, more than half. Francis assisting on 21 of 52 that Stoughton scored that year, and almost half of Francis's assists were with him collaborating. He also had good chemistry with the likes of tough guy Gary Howitt, collaborating on 9 assists. Also, Mark Howe, and he had good chemistry on the ice. which helped vastly improve the Whalers' power play to 10th in the league. And also, as 12 of Ronnie's 25 goals were power play markers. Now, you would think this would get Francis in contention for the Calder Trophy as League Rookie of the Year, but you'd actually be wrong. Ron Francis finished 10th with voting, just 3 votes. He wasn't even a finalist. Now, on paper, to me, that sounds wrong, and I'd say he deserved to be a bit higher than 10th at least. But it was clear Dale Hawerchuk was winning the damn thing regardless of who was in there, becoming the second team in NHL history to score 100 points in a season. However, he had turned around the Winnipeg Jets to boot. But, if you know, to put that into context, Francis' 68 points was 7th among rookies. Yes, 7th among rookies. 68 points. Can you believe that? So then, well, there you go. Well, hey, Ron Francis had a ride, but his recognition is drowned out by other rookies. And the fact he's on a team that nobody's really paying attention to, except, of course, the actual fans in the city. And their fandom for him was already on fire, however, needless to say. They saw a star in him, they recognized what he could do for the team, and the success he could possibly bring them. 7th in rookie scoring, with those 68 points in 59 games, and helped improve the Whalers' stagnant power play with 12 goals. But the team still had a long way to go. They only won 21 games and missed the playoffs, and Francis was a minus 15, but that's fair to be expected on a team like this. After a successfully and seemingly quiet rookie year in terms of overall recognition, Ron Francis at 19 years old was prepping for his sophomore season. And while he wasn't facing pressure quite yet to lead the team, Dave Keon, who helped mentor Francis in his rookie year, had retired after 22 professional hockey seasons, 18 of which he spent in the NHL. The biggest blow, however, came when they would lose Mark Howe to the Flyers, trading him for Kenny Linsman. When, hey, that sounds great, except he doesn't play a single game for the Whalers. Flo trades him to the Oilers for Finnish defenseman Risto Siltanen. Still not a bad deal, really, in the grand scheme of things. But they also get Greg C. Adams, because getting guys with penalty minutes was a big thing in the 80s. I don't know. They also got a 1983 first round and third round pick. They also acquired Mark Johnson, a forward and prospect and superstar from the Olympic gold medalist team of the Miracle on Ice, and a new coach. Plo focused on his GM duties and hired Larry Kish, who guided the Whalers minor league affiliate, the Binghamton Whalers, to an appearance in the Calder Cup. Plo made some waves at the draft and would impact the organization for years to come, as he drafted the likes of Kevin Dineen, Ulf Samuelsson, and Ray Ferraro all in later rounds. But it'd be a little while before we see them. But will any of these things improve the Whalers in any significant way? Well, one thing we don't want to improve them is those damn Cooperalls. My god, just look at these things. Snow pants for adults. The Flyers wore these things for 2 years, whereas the Whalers adopted them for this year. Although, if we're being specific, these are actually made by CCM, but Cooper was the influence, so curse them both and dogs on it. Anyway, let's see what Ronnie can do this season. He began the year very well, with his goal setups were becoming a major highlight for the team, with his 11 assists to go with a goal, which included 3 2-assist games, one of which was set up by Ray Neufeld, a Ray Neufeld goal, with 1:52 to play to tie the mighty Oilers. Also, Francis had a monster 5 assists and a 6-5 win over the defending Campbell Conference champions, the Vancouver Canucks. At the end of October into November, Ronnie went on a tear of a 10-game point streak, and notched 16 points in 12 games and 6 2-point games, and he carried the momentum into the best month of his career to date. 5 goals, 15 assists, 20 points in just 14 games, and was a +5. This youngster from the Sioux was making the pages of the Connecticut New England sports pages in the papers, and fans gravitated towards him for his work ethic and hustle. Part of that was from a winning streak. Yes, the Whalers actually had one. And in that streak, he had 9 points, averaging 3 a game. 2 goals against the Habs, 4 assists against the Flyers in what I call the Cooperalls Cup, brought to you by CCM, and 2 goals and an assist against the division rivals Buffalo on the road. The Whalers, however, were still pretty terrible in the grand scheme of things. Francis had a pretty good January with 14 points in 14 games, but in that time, Larry Kish was fired as head coach. Larry Plo had returned behind the bench. Things didn't get much better. Also in that time, Francis got a game misconduct in one game and a fight against Guy Carbonneau of the Habs. Oy. Francis never threw down or got in much trouble penalty-wise, but stood up for his team against division rivals. As a matter of fact, most of the penalty minutes in Francis' career are against division rival teams, no matter where he played. Another reason people loved him. Francis in his fantastic season was rewarded with a selection at the NHL All-Star Game for the very first time. The game took place on February 8, 1983 in Uniondale, New York, home of the three-time defending champion New York Islanders. A night known for Gretzky's 4 goals, all in the third period, all 4 of his shifts. Ronnie had 12 points in 13 games in February, but was a -9, and the Whalers were just lost. Ronnie's big season, however, had another big highlight coming. His first career hat trick. A natural hat trick, no less, against another division rival, the Quebec Nordiques. Yes, scoring all 3 on the great Dan Bouchard. It gave the Whalers fans something to cheer about as his first goal of the game. They were down 4-0. However, down 7-1, barely half the crowd remained, but scoring 2 late third period goals to make it happen. He was named one of the game's 3 stars, and the few fans that were still in attendance gave him a tremendous ovation. A great one, albeit somewhat bittersweet. The Whalers season mercifully ended on April 4th, 1983. They were 19-54-7, and they were dead last in their division and second worst in the entire league, still showing no growth. Francis finished the season with 31 goals and 59 assists for 90 points. Outstanding year, truly making himself the big fish in the small pond. And to little surprise, Blaine Stoughton is the man Ron clicks with more than any other. They collaborated on 43 different goals, meaning nearly half of Ron's point totals was with Stoughton, including Stoughton assisting on 12 of the 31 goals Francis would score, and in turn Ron assisting on more than half of Stoughton's 45 goals that year with 24 assists, and collaborating on 7 assists together as well, a category where Ronnie teamed up with 17 different players assisting on goals. He also had a good chemistry with Mark Johnson, the new acquisition, as well as Pierre LaRouche, who was acquired from Montreal the year prior and only played 38 games this year, and of course that meant he was off to the New York Rangers after this season. Also, Ron's 59 assists were tied for 10th best in the league, along with Guy Chouinard of Calgary and Oilers superstar Jari Kurri. Well, he's evolving into one of the best set-up men and passers in the game. And look at this list. 12 players, 8 Hall of Famers, the other 4 had really good careers. Ron also got a vote for the Lady Byng Trophy, which is awarded anyway to the player who best exemplifies excellence and sportsmanship. And Ron was a classy guy, fights with division rivals and all. The Whalers' woes continue, but Francis' star rises. In addition to being 10th in assists, he was also tied for 18th in the NHL with overall points with 90. Yes, that was good enough for 18th in the league. Also being selected to his first NHL All-Star game is definitely a highlight. And of course led his team in scoring for the first time. So speaking of his team, his impact on the Whalers and their fans was felt, as he received the Booster Club MVP award voted by the Whalers fan club. He was also voted favorite Whaler by fans of the city in a citywide poll, and also received the Mark Kravitz Memorial Award as team MVP voted by his own teammates. Of course, he again finished a -26 and the Whalers missed the playoffs, but again, these things are sadly still to be expected. Francis had won the hearts of fans in Hartford, but around the league wasn't getting the recognition some experts felt that he deserved. Hey, it happens in sports where you play for a small market team, you put up great numbers, and lead the team in a big way. But the Whalers needed some big changes. Larry Plow was finished as GM, but stayed on with the organization in a different role. But they hired one of the best general managers of all time, and some feel even one of the most controversial of all time, the great Emile the Cat Francis, who had success as general manager with the New York Rangers for many years, and more recently with the St. Louis Blues. The new man behind the bench, after 3 different coaches the year prior, is Jack Evans, who has done very well in the East Coast Hockey League for the last few years, albeit had an unsuccessful few years in the NHL, but does have coaching experience with the Steelers/Barons franchise in the mid-1970s. They also made their biggest draft pick since Francis' arrival, that being Sylvain Turgeon, a star with the Hall Olympique of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, second overall. The Whalers were building a good stockpile of young players, but Francis is proving he could be the leader of said young players for the future. The team, who had improved their power play, however, had plummeted it to second and last, and their penalty kill had actually improved somewhat. Can Evans and Emile, and of course Ron, may take this team in a better direction, and without those damn Cooperalls, thank God. Well, he began the season well with 12 points in his first 10 games, and then the Whalers, well, they weren't awful, they were simply meh. In November, he stayed the course with 11 points in 12 games, and the Whalers were showing some signs of improvement. In December, Ronnie missed a few games to begin the month, but returned to action and was outstanding. 15 points in 11 games, but the Whalers have reverted back to their old habits and more losses mounted. However, he amassed a huge 4-point night against the Leafs on December the 8th with a goal and 3 assists, and had 3 assists against a very talented Minnesota North Stars squad. Francis literally had the exact same numbers in January and more great games, but the Whalers were still losing. Also, Ron missed 3 more games this month due to minor injuries. He continued his success against the Stars with 4 assists, had 2 goals and an assist for 3 points against a struggling Montreal Canadiens squad in a tie, and then 3 assists to end the month against a very good Nordiques team. Also on January 15th, Francis, who has never claimed to be a tough guy, does get heated, however, with division rivals, and we know that, but he went up against notorious tough man Tiger Williams of the Vancouver Canucks and dropped gloves with him. Well, it didn't exactly end all that well for Ron, but he was admired for standing his ground against a much tougher player. The Whalers, however, were 16 points out of a playoff spot, and they started to pick things up a bit again in February, and Ron had the game, however, of his life. Now, the Edmonton Oilers, who were now the defending Campbell Conference champions, came to town. However, they were without Gretzky on February the 12th. And without their leader, the Oilers were on a bit of a losing streak, but all the losses were to winning clubs. So many people felt, and they wholeheartedly believed, because since every other player was healthy, that there was really no excuse for this, and that they'd end this streak against this lowly Whalers team. Well, 126 into the game, Francis got in the right position, however, for the power play. Ray Neufeld finds him, and the Whalers are looking good. 2:24 later, Francis again found at the right spot, this time from Sullivan, and now he has 2 goals not even 5 minutes into the game. Going into the second period, the Whalers lead 3-0, even without Gretzky. This was very shocking. The Oilers were getting frustrated and taking dumb penalties, and in the first of those, Francis found Greg Malone on the power play, his 3rd point of the game. The Whalers lead 4-0. The Whalers then later took a 6-0 lead, and this time Malone finds Francis on the power play. It's a hat trick, baby! The second of Ron's career. And on top of that, after 2 periods, Civic Arena was louder and louder, shaking as loud as it ever has since Ronnie Franchise's arrival, as the Whalers led 8-0 after 2. Star goaltender Grant Fuhr is finished for the night. But literally off the opening face-off, Francis carries the puck in all on his own after winning the draw, and he skates in on goal on Andy Moog. He scores 4 goals, 5 points. Oh boy. Well, Moog, he didn't want you to feel left out. What an amazing game, and a highlight for Whalers fans of the year. And when Ron was named the first star of the game, the crowd chanted, "Ronnie, Ronnie, Ronnie." And indeed, that is a chant that would be echoing in that arena for years to come. Francis had 6 more 2-point games that month, and had 21 points in 13 games, and the Whalers were still out of a playoff spot by 11 points, and they had no hope in that regard. But now also the Whalers would trade Blaine Stoughton near the deadline, and while it could be coincidental, Ron's production actually plummeted after that time, just 9 points in his final 15 games, and the Whalers just ran out of what little steam they had. They improved slightly, however, with a record of 28, 42, and 10. Ron Francis had 23 goals and 60 assists for 83 points in 72 games, maybe down from last season, but he also played 7 games less, thus scoring 7 less points, and what seems very coincidental. He continued to click with Blaine Stoughton, collaborating for 24 points. Stoughton only had 37 points before the trade, meaning Ronnie was in all but 13 of his points, and assisted on 16 of Stoughton's 24 goals, literally 2/3. Ron had 18 different players assist on his goals, and he tied with Risto Siltanen and rookie Sylvain Turgeon with 7 helpers each. And he had good chemistry with both the Finnish blue liner and rookie prospect, who was a finalist for the Calder Trophy. This is what Francis would always pride himself on, drawing from the abilities of his teammates, no matter how much or how little they have had, which in turn made himself all the more better. Yeah, it wasn't quite successful statistically anyway as his 82-83 season, but Ron Francis' game, however, continued to mature and grow. He won more team awards, including the 3-Star Award of Excellence for most points off 3-star selections, similar to the Molson Cup here in Canada. Also, for the 2nd straight year, he was voted the most popular Whalers player by the fans, and also the team was finally starting to show a little bit of life, and they had some good young talent coming up. It looked to finally have a little bit of direction, and he was a big reason for that. He was leading by example and determined to get this team to another level at long last. The Whalers' progression seemed to be, well, existent, and Jack Evans saw it in camp, as Canada national team star Kevin Dineen and brand new knuckle-dragger Swedish defenseman Ulf Samuelsson would be added to the club. The Whalers needed more goals, as their goaltending, led by Greg Millen, saw slight improvement in 1983-84. Francis, however, was passed up for Team Canada for the Canada Cup, taking place in September of 1984. As a matter of fact, Francis has yet to participate in any international hockey tournament. He never played in the World Juniors, and despite missing the playoffs for 3 straight years, never played in the World Championship. I've done a bit of research on this, and it's not known whether he just turned down offers or was even asked. But for the Canada Cup, he never really did get much of a look, mind you. But this is a tournament that would cut Hall of Fame players more than once since its inception in 1976. But Francis' focus was the Whalers and their next step, as the team made a good draft pick with defenseman Sylvain Cote joining the team. And the changing landscape of the NHL was also interesting, as the great Gretzky and the mighty Oilers dethroned the 4-time defending champions, the Kings of the Mountain, the New York Islanders, the prior season. Also, a 19-year-old phenom from Montreal, being deemed a generational talent, was about to make his debut for a team much worse than the Whalers. That would be the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they were going forward with a fellow by the name of Mario Lemieux. Well, meanwhile, a 21-year-old kid from the Sioux is about to enter his 4th NHL season and isn't craving attention, but is craving success. But how well will he do without collaborator Blaine Stoughton? Well, the Whalers and Ronnie had a great October, starting 6-4-1 with Francis having 14 points in those 11 games. It was the best start in their NHL history, and that included a game with 2 goals and an assist for 3 points against Chicago. But as quick as things got good, it got worse just as quick in November. Francis went into the biggest slump of his career, a 6-game scoring drought devoid of any points whatsoever. He'd only scored 5 the entire month and was a pretty bad -10. And the Whalers were back to their losing ways, only having won 2 games the whole month of November. However, he was back to form with 3 goals and 10 assists for 13 points in 12 games, including a 4-assist outing and a big win over the Habs. Going into the new year, the Whalers were 8 points out of a playoff spot. In January, Ronnie went on a tear. 19 points in 13 games and had his 3rd career hat-trick and 2nd natural hat-trick, and added an assist for a 4-point night against a lowly Toronto Maple Leafs squad. A special moment for the Sioux native. And indeed, playing a big game, being named the first star of the storied Maple Leaf Gardens, getting to skate out onto that storied ice surface that he'd watched for so many years on January 6th. He had 5 other 2-point games that month, and despite adding gritty rookie Kevin Dineen as part of the full-time lineup and a young Ray Ferraro coming along the way, the team still wasn't posing much of a threat. On February 12th, Ron was selected for the 2nd time in 3 seasons to play in the NHL All-Star Game as the Whalers representative. And it was there he got to meet a young 19-year-old by the name of Mario Lemieux, making waves in Pittsburgh, who had won the MVP of that All-Star Game in a 6-4 win for the Wales Conference. But February was a slow month, winning only 3 games the whole month, and Ronnie did have 3 assists in a win over the Rangers, and one of only 3 wins for the Whalers again. He had 12 points in 14 games, that was a -7. Going into the final stretch, the Whalers were 15 points into a playoff spot, but did acquire goaltender Mike Liut, an all-star from the St. Louis Blues and former MVP finalist and Pearson Award winner. They parted with Craig Millen, and this was a huge deal. In that final stretch, the last 19 games of the year from March going into early April, Ron played very, very well. 18 points, including 3 assists against the Canucks on March the 5th, and a goal and 2 assists for 3 points against the Habs on the 10th. The Whalers reached 30 wins for their first time in their NHL history, finishing 30, 41, and 9 for 69 points, but again, not nearly good enough for the playoffs. Francis didn't miss a single game this year, playing in all 80 with 24 goals and 57 assists for 81 points, still averaging a point a game, a good year. Though not his best in that regard, but is still the best all-around player on the team, no doubt. But how did he do in his first year without Blaine Stoughton at his side? Well, a very mixed bag, and lots of different players he clicked with. One was surprised was actually Dave Lumley, a hard-working winger acquired from the Edmonton Oilers, fresh off a Stanley Cup ring, assisted on 11 of Ronnie's goals, nearly half. But of course he was dropped by the Whalers and went back to Edmonton and got himself another Stanley Cup ring. Francis spread the wealth, however, assisting on goals to 19 different players, but most of them went to rising star Sylvain Turgeon with 12. Also again, Risto Siltanen was a top assist collaborator with 11, but worked very well all season along with other defensemen such as Joel Quenneville and rookie Sylvain Cote. Ron's season, however, wasn't done. He actually got his first taste of international hockey, and in 1985 he represented Team Canada at the World Ice Hockey Championships in the spring, joined by teammates Kevin Dineen and backup goalie Steve Weeks. He joined a team that had such players as, well, Mario Lemieux, Steve Yzerman, Larry Murphy, Scott Stevens, Bernie Nichols, Rick Vive, Dave Taylor, and Kirk Muller. Francis had an excellent tournament with 7 points in 10 games, which saw Canada beat the Soviet Union in this tournament for the first time since 1961. However, they lose the gold medal to Czechoslovakia, but walk away with a silver, their best showing also in many years. Also, Ulf Samuelsson of the Whalers represented Sweden, while Paul Fenton represented Team USA. Mark Johnson did as well, but he was part of the Millen Liut trade and was now a member of the St. Louis Blues. Francis' 81 points did lead his team in scoring for his second time in 4 seasons. He also dominated team awards, as he was again the Whalers Booster Club choice for MVP for the second time, his teammates' choice as team MVP for the second time, voted favorite Whaler by the fans for a third straight year, and won the 3-star award of excellence for the second straight time, having the most, again, gained 3-star awards. But on top of that, he played in his second NHL All-Star game and won his first international award, taking home a silver medal for a stacked Team Canada team at the 1985 Ice Hockey World Championships. But the Whalers would miss the playoffs for the 5th straight year in their history, and 4th, all 4 seasons that is, that Francis has played, and he has yet to see postseason action. Going into his 5th season in 1985-86, Ron Francis had established himself as the heart of Hartford. Fans loved him because of his work ethic and the fact that he was always producing, and the media liked him because of how he approached the game and his fierce pursuit of the puck in any given play. His teammates loved him because he was a quiet leader who led by example and was always trying to make everyone around him better to also better his game, so in turn the whole team can see success. It's these reasons why, at the age of 22, he was named Team Captain, a unanimous choice by the team. The Whalers were growing, but many felt that this last season should have been more of an improvement. Their power play, however, did improve again to 10th best in the league last season, thanks in large part to gritty young forwards such as Dineen and Ferraro. Their penalty kill had become one of the best in the league, thanks to the likes of Mike Zook and Dave Tippett. Their goals against also improved to 12th least in the league, and now the superstar goaltender with Mike Liut, it can get even better. But they're still in the basement in terms of goal scoring, which in this era you need to succeed. Also, being in the Adams division wasn't easy. It's one of the most competitive and toughest in the whole league, as all 4 playoff teams usually had a winning record, which wasn't always the case in other divisions, where teams with 22-23 wins actually had a chance to playoff spot towards the end of the season. But General Manager Emil Francis and Head Coach Jack Evans stuck to their plan, and with Ronnie leading the way, could Hartford make that important next step? And just before the season started, they acquired Tim Bothwell, defenseman from the St. Louis Blues, and gave up Chris Katsopoulos for forward Stuart Gavin from the Leafs, and also have obtained a reliable goal scorer in Jorgen Pettersson from the St. Louis Blues. And Captain Ron was off to a hot start. 6 goals, 8 assists, 14 points in just 10 games in October, including a 2-goal, 2-assist, 4-point night in a win over the Rangers, and his 4th career hat-trick in a monster 11-6 win over the Montreal Canadiens. And the Whalers were looking good with a 6-4-0 start. But the Whalers began to struggle slightly in November, but Ronnie was still doing his thing. 15 points in 12 games, including 4 assists in a win over the Stars, a team he seems to traditionally do well against. And 4 days later, the Whalers began a Western road swing, beginning with a win in Los Angeles, making it 6 points in 2 games, a goal and 2 assists for 3 points against that very Kings team. Pundits and experts were noting that Ron has taken his game to a whole new level. Also during this time, the Whalers parted ways with fan favorite Ray Neufeld, who Ron had worked pretty well with in the past, and sent him to Winnipeg in exchange for all-star defenseman Dave Babbage to add more to their power play, and he's a bit more of a scoring defenseman. The Whalers then turned it up again in December, and hey, so did our hero, with 18 points in 14 games, 4 goals and 14 assists, and that included a goal and 3 assists for 4 points against the Bruins, a huge win, a goal and 2 assists for 3 points in a very exciting 7-6 win over the New Jersey Devils, and replicated that number in Toronto a week later on December 28th. Ronnie was truly throwing his name in the hat for MVP talks. Yes, well, we're well aware nobody was beating Gretzky in this era, but I mean, even being a finalist or even close to it, like say in the top 5 or 6, would be a feat, so shut up! Anyway. Also, the Whalers parted with Pettersson already, who wasn't producing all that much, and then to help their defensive forward depth, they added Iron Man, that's right, the NHL's Iron Man, Doug Jarvis from the Washington Capitals. Emil the Cat was making quick moves and big deals, but look at this. The Whalers don't suck! Yes, Ronnie now in his 5th season as his team in aim of the playoffs. They're 39 points in 4th place, and with that final slot, they are tied, however, with the Sabres going into the new year, but they have one win more, meaning they take that 4th spot for the time being. And the division is so tight this year that they're only 3 points behind first place Montreal. How crazy is this? Also, the NHL All-Star game that year was in Hartford, and Ron was going to be selected as the Whalers representative in what no doubt would be a huge moment for the youngster. And hey, things were looking pretty good in January. On the 7th, Ronnie had a goal and 2 assists for another 3-point night against the Flames. But then on January 17th, they began a home-and-home series with their heated rivals, the Nordiques. The first game, the Whalers won 11-6, Ronnie having again a banner game, 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points. Then the next game started off pretty well. Francis scored the first goal of the game, his 19th of the year, and the Whalers led 1-0. Then disaster struck. Francis fell awkwardly and had to be carted off the ice in what was later revealed to be a fractured ankle. This was bad not just for Ron, but for the Whalers, who finally like to be gaining prominence. And their first playoff spot in 6 seasons, and the first of Ron's career, but the prognosis was grim. The Whalers won the game, and their next 3, despite Ron being gone, and they were on a 5-game winning streak overall, but then a 4-game losing streak followed into the All-Star break. It was a bittersweet moment for Ron Francis on his crutches, who came out to an introduction during this All-Star game, but still received a rousing ovation and chants of Ronnie through the crowd for the very fans who adored him. It would have been his 3rd All-Star game. Sylvain Turgeon, a rising star in his own right, took his place in what was a 4-3 win for the Wales Conference. Without Francis, however, the Whalers were a disaster in February. They only won 2 games the whole month, and would also soon part with defenseman Risto Siltanen, one of Ron's biggest collaborators, sending him to Quebec for John Anderson, a reliable veteran goal scorer, best known for his time with the Leafs. It was back to reality for the Whalers going into the final stretch of the season, and the timetable for Ronnie's return was iffy. They were now again in that familiar spot out dead last, 6 points behind 4th place Buffalo. Oh boy. This looked bleak at best. But then something happened. In March, they won 6 out of 9 games, and also veteran defenseman Mike McEwen joins the team. After a March 18th win over Detroit, they were just 2 points out of a playoff spot for 4th in the division, just behind struggling Buffalo. Also, they got the best news at the time. Ronnie Franchise is coming back, a bit earlier than expected, no less. And hey, he hasn't lost a step with a goal and 2 assists for 3 points in his return against the Blues in a big win on March 19th, his first game in 2 months. He then had an assist in a win over the Kings, and then had a monster 4 points with a goal and 3 helpers in the next game against the Bruins on March 23rd, ending in a tie. A goal in a win over Montreal followed. A goal and 2 assists in a tie with the Capitals to end the month was after that. Ronnie is roaring, and the Whalers are making a splash. With 4 games to go, they sat in 4th place with the same point total, but have 1 more win than the Buffalo Sabres going into the final 4 games of the season in April. And as luck would have it, they're playing the Sabres on April 1st. The Whalers have 4 games to go compared to the Sabres 3. A win here would be immense. Ah, yes. A sellout crowd at the Civic Center, and it's rocking like never before. Whaler fever, Whaler mania, whatever you want to call it, was sweeping the region. Our hero has scored in every game since his return. He's on a 5-game point streak. Now, Ray Ferraro, who's had a breakout year, scores his 29th goal of the year to open the scoring under 4 minutes in. But the Sabres take a 2-1 lead after the first period. It does not look good in the second as Mike Foligno scores for the Sabres, making it a 2-goal game, but 40 seconds later, our hero takes the puck into the Sabres zone. Ronnie to Deneen! He scores his 31st of the year! And then, with time winding down the period, Stu Gavin, acquired just before the season began, scores his 26th. It's tied 3-3 after 2. And 3:19 of the third period, Ronnie to Sammy to Ulf! He scores. The Whalers lead 4-3, and with 1:28 to go, Deneen scores again. It is over. The Whalers win. The Whalers win. Our hero continues his point streak. A monster game from Kevin Deneen. You can see this team has been built around Ron with these young stars, and now the few veterans as well, adding some depth. But the Whalers are now 2 points up on Buffalo with 3 games for them to go. The Sabres still have 2, so the Whalers aren't in it quite yet. However, despite this hot streak, it had ended, as Francis had an assist in a 4-2 loss against the stacked Capitals squad. And bad news, the Sabres had just won over the Habs the very next day, meaning they were tied again, but the Whalers would have to lose their next 2 games. The Sabres need a win. They faced the Toronto Maple Leafs, who had only won 25 games, however, all year at home. Another packed house at the Civic Center. Our hero scores a goal on the heels of John Anderson's three-point night against his former team. A 7-1 win. The Hartford Whalers are going to the playoffs. Now in his 5th season, after missing 29 games, the hard work of the captain and his crew pays off. The team shakes off his absence after an awful February, wins enough games for them to still be in contention when he returns. They stay hot, only losing once the rest of the season. After this win, they finish with a 4-3 win over the Bruins. Ron's 9-game return not only season goes 7-1-1, and he ends the season himself on a 9-game point streak. They finished 40 wins, 36 losses, and 4 ties for 84 points. The Whalers' best season in the NHL to date. Their first ever winning record. Their first of reaching 40 wins, of course. Their first playoff spot since 1980, and the first of Ron's career. That's right. He can finally say, it's playoff time. Oh boy, but it's not going to come easy as they take on the first place winners of the Adams Division, the Quebec Nordiques. The Nords finished with 92 points, and while they entered the NHL the same year as the Whalers, they've been quite the opposite. They missed the playoffs in their inaugural NHL season, and now have made the playoffs every year ever since. Well, in the year prior, they made it all the way to the conference finals. They were led by superstar forwards, the great Peter Stastny, and arguably the league's best left winger of this era, Michel Goulet. They had scored 122 and 104 points respectively each. Yikes. You also had talented forwards such as Peter's brother Anton Stastny, Brent Ashton, and gritty pesky power forward Dale Hunter. A defense led by veteran Robert Picard, as well as David Shaw, Randy Muller, and Gilbert Delorme. And 2 superb netminers in Clint Malarchuk and young Mario Gosselin. And let's see what our hero can do in his first playoff series. The first round is best of 5, and here we go. Game 1, Le Colisée in Quebec City. The game is tied 1-1 after the first period, and goaltenders Malarchuk and Liud are putting on a great show. And so much so, it's still 1-1 after 2. On a power play goal midway through the third period, makes it in, making a perfect setup for John Anderson. A goal, the Whalers lead 2-1. However, the Nords tied it 2-2 a few minutes later and were up to overtime. Just 2:36 in, Turgeon scores, and the Whalers actually win their first playoff game in their history in the NHL, 3-2 on the road. Game 2 still in Quebec is very intense and the Whalers are flying. The Nords are getting attacked often in their own zone, and Malarchuk just couldn't handle it. A huge 4-1 win for the Whalers, our hero Ronnie Franchise, who wins many key face-offs in the win. This is a huge shock. The Whalers are leading the series 2-0 in both road games and are poised to commit a sweep. In Game 3, the Civic Center, a jam-packed crowd, thinking that, they're thinking that they could barely give away tickets to this arena just a couple years prior when Ron was in his early years. And now you can't even buy a ticket from a scalper outside, for crying out loud. Well, yes, Whaler fever is at peak temperature. The Whalers scored both a shorthanded goal and a power play goal just 5:22 into the game, leading 2-0. The Nords got one back, but Mike McEwen begins a rush. Deneen takes it. Oh, look, Ronnie is open. He scores his first career playoff goal. And this gives the Whalers a 3-1 lead still in the first. And then on the power play in the first, now up 3-2. Francis takes control of the power play. He gets it to Ferraro, to Anderson. He scores. Ronnie has 2 points on the night, a goal and assist. The Whalers have a 4-2 lead en route to a stunning 9-4 win, a series sweep in 3 straight. Ron Francis played very well in his first playoff series, a goal, 2 assists, 3 points in the 3-game sweep. He was also a superb +3, tied for second best on the team during this series. He also played a great defensive game, and the Whalers were killing in the face-off circle thanks to he and Jarvis. And now, with the Whalers' first playoff series win under their belt, they are anxious for the next round. In their way home for the Adams Division final is the Montreal Canadiens. And what would this be? A huge feather in the Whalers' cap, or maybe a splash in their blowhole, more so likely, if they can go 2 for 2 against both teams from La Belle Province. The Habs finished with 87 points in second place, just 3 ahead of the Whalers, and themselves are coming off a sweep, this one over the Boston Bruins. The Montreal Canadiens were the toast of the NHL in the 1970s, but their time was up come 1980. They've remained a prominent contender every year pretty much since, but are looking for their first cup win since 1979. Well, there are still remnants of those old glory days from the Habs, such as Captain Bob Gainey, who is one of the best defensive forwards in the league, and superstar defenseman Larry Robinson, who is an all-star now in his 14th season. The Habs were bolstering a team with almost 10 rookies, but the stars were there still. All-star center Bobby Smith and superstar 100-point scorer Mats Naslund out of Sweden, to name a couple. Also up front, you had rookie sensation Gilles Dallin, Guy Carbonneau, Brian Skrudlin, Stéphane Richer, and added late in the season, Claude Lemieux. Joining Robinson on defense, he had young stars Peter Svoboda and Chris Chelios. He also had veteran Rick Green and the grossly underrated Craig Ludwig. And in net, rookie Patrick Roy. The Habs were only slightly favored to win this, however, so that meant the Whalers had a big chance. Game 1. The fabulous Forum. Our hero doesn't play a big game, but he didn't need to. Stu Gavin's 2 goals in a 3-point night were enough to lift the Whalers to a stunning 4-1 win at the Forum. The Habs, however, roared back in Game 2, winning 3-1, as Ron only has 1 shot in the first 2 games, as the Whalers would suffer their first loss in these playoffs, but we're still in good shape as the series is tied 1-1 heading to Hartford. Whaler Mania is running wild, brother, as the fans in the Civic Center are psyched for Game 3. Francis is not playing well, as he has another rough night, and Habs actually win this one again 4-1, as Carbonneau is making Ronnie's life miserable. The Whalers star goaltender Steve Weeks in Game 4 as Liu played terribly in the last game. Ronnie is much more focused and determined, and despite the fact that he is still held up the score sheet, it's tied 1-1 after regulation. And 107 in overtime. Kevin Dineen makes a great individual effort, and the series is tied as we head back to Montreal. Game 5, Patrick Roy was treating Ron Franchise as if he was shooting a beach ball. He just couldn't get anything past him. The Habs win 5-3, take a 3-2 series lead. The Whalers on the verge of elimination going home. Game 6 at the Civic Center at the Whale Tank. Mike Liu is back in net. And, hey, they still have hope in their team, and they still believe. Liu plays superbly and notches a 32-save shutout. Dineen scores the only goal of the game, despite Montreal's defense not making it easy. We are going to Game 7 back in Montreal. Ron has been heavily criticized for his play, and he has been held pointless in this series. Now would be the time for him to step up. However, on the other side of the coin, speculation of how just bad his injury was starting to surface. Maybe he came back too soon. Maybe that flurry he had late in the regular season might have just injured him a little more or re-aggravated something. It's never been confirmed or, for that matter, denied. But here we go. Game 7. The Forum. The Habs are in full control despite great goaltending from Liu and only hold a 1-0 lead in the third period. But time on the Whalers season is counting down, but with 2:48 to go, Dave Babbage saves the season, and we are going to overtime. That this would be the time for Ronnie to be the hero. Time for Ronnie Franchise to triumph. Time for Claude Lemieux to end your season. The Habs move on, and they would actually become the eventual Stanley Cup champions in perhaps the most bizarre playoff season in NHL history. Not a good series whatsoever for Francis. Pointless and a very bad -4. He couldn't escape Guy Carbonneau, and when he did, Patrick Roy had his number, or that or one of many Montreal defensemen. Again, rumors of his injury acting up made the rounds, but Francis is not the type of guy to use that as an excuse or gain sympathy. If anything, he'd take the blame before any of that. Be that as it may, the Whalers have nothing to be ashamed of this season, and a lot to look forward to in the future. Ron Francis had 24 goals and 53 assists for 77 points in just 53 games, perhaps robbing him of what might have been his first 100-point season, as he only had 4 points less than the year prior where he played a full 80 games. His chemistry with Sylvain Turgeon, however, was off the charts, as Ronnie assists on 12 of Turgeon's 45 goals, and they collaborated together on 10. In total, 29 of Ron's 77 points involved Sylvain. Also, Kevin Dineen was his other favorite, Dineen assisting on 9 of 24 of Ron's goals, more than a third. Together, they worked together, easy for me to say, for 26 goals in some way. Fantastic. Also, Ron had great chemistry with the likes of Ray Ferraro and John Anderson when he arrived to the team. For the first time in his career, despite missing 27 games, he was actually still recognized in many ways for his contribution and value to the Whalers, registering his first ever Hart Trophy vote, coming in 10th, tied for 10th it is, in voting. Sadly, however, he was likely robbed of more votes due to his injury, but either way, a pretty good accomplishment. So yes, indeed, despite the obstacles and missing those 27 games, Ron Francis had a tremendous season. He returned in the nick of time to help the Whalers go unbeaten 8 of 9 games to win that final playoff spot and make their first since their first year in the league. And for Ron, his very first playoff appearance ever, leading to their first playoff series win. Also their first 40-win and first ever winning season ever. Also, his 77 points in 53 games gave him a points per game average of 1.45, tied for 7th best in the NHL with Chicago superstar Denis Savard. Also, he was a career-high +5, finishing on the plus side of plus-minus for the first time in his career. And he took home more team awards, including his 3rd straight 3-star Award of Excellence. He won the Booster Club MVP and Mark Kravitz Player's Choice Team MVP for the 3rd time each. He was selected to play in the NHL All-Star Game, but of course he could not. And also registered his first ever vote for the Hart Trophy as League MVP. Also on top of that, he was named, at the beginning of the year, Team Captain. 5 seasons now under his belt, the man who truly was the heart of Hartford may not be making a lot of magazine covers or getting national endorsement deals, but he has endeared himself to the community. Active in many charity and youth hockey programs, and now also getting married to someone in the area, Hartford truly was his home. But Ron's dedication is truly mark of a class individual, a tried and true leader respected by his team, his game evolving as he gets older, and now the Hartford Whalers after a big season finally have a future, it seems. And Ronnie Franchise will lead the way. And on that note, that does it for part 1 of our look at Ron Francis. Stay tuned for part 2 as we continue his journey in Hartford and something that ends up in an unexpected turn down the road. But in the meantime, click like, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, I'll see ya!